When an empath finally stops trying to please everyone and begins seeing things as they are, something remarkable happens. They don't turn cold or selfish, they become powerful. Not dangerous to others, but to every system that has thrived on their constant giving. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the birth of the true self. And for empaths, it's the most rebellious act in a world built on their endless self-sacrifice. Picture this. You're sitting alone after another exhausting day of managing everyone else's emotions. You've said yes when your whole being screamed no. You smiled through pain to keep others comfortable. You've soaked in their anxiety until your body feels like a live wire. But then something shifts. Instead of pushing through like always, you pause. You ask yourself a question that changes everything. What if I stopped? That question marks the beginning of consciousness. Jung said this is where awakening truly begins, the moment you dare to stop running and face yourself. For the empath, that's the point of no return. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. But here's the truth Jung uncovered that most people never talk about. An empath's ability to feel everything isn't always a divine gift. It's often what I call survival sensitivity, a trauma response that's learned to masquerade as compassion. Jung noticed this over and over in his patients. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can empaths become who they truly are when they've never learned where others end and they begin? When that first moment of awakening hits, it's not gentle. It's a collision. Jung called it the confrontation with the unconscious, a sudden crash between who you think you are and who you really are. The empath sees, maybe for the first time, that their entire identity has been built on a lie, the belief that they are responsible for everyone else's feelings. Jung found that highly sensitive people often develop what he called inflated compassion. They become addicted to being needed, because being needed is the only way they've ever felt valuable. But when that illusion cracks, something extraordinary begins. The real self starts to surface. And this is where Jung's work becomes revolutionary for empaths. He discovered that everyone carries what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or repress. But for empaths, that shadow holds something surprising: rage. Pure, righteous rage at being used, manipulated, and taken for granted. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For empaths, that darkness isn't evil. It's the buried anger, the denied needs, the silenced voice. When they finally face it, everything changes. The empath who meets their shadow doesn't turn cruel. They become what I call consciously selective. They begin to see through manipulation that once felt invisible. They recognize emotional vampires. They can finally tell the difference between real need and manufactured crisis. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. Jung observed 8 recurring patterns that emerge when sensitive people begin individuation, what I call the 8 signs of conscious awakening. These signs mark the birth of psychological sovereignty, when an empath finally stops living for others and starts living from within. Sign 1. The energy shift. The first sign is what I call the energy reversal. Instead of your energy flowing outward to feed everyone else, it starts returning to you. Jung noticed this in many of his patients. The moment they stopped unconsciously giving their life force away, they suddenly had vitality again. You stop feeling drained after every conversation. You stop absorbing everyone's bad moods. Most importantly, you stop feeling guilty for protecting your own energy. Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. When you stop trying to be everything for everyone, your own heart finally becomes visible. If you've ever been told you're too sensitive, remind yourself, your sensitivity isn't weakness. It's your superpower. But here's the twist. Other people notice your transformation before you do. They can sense you're no longer their emotional dumping ground. Some will try to guilt you back into your old role. You've changed, they'll say. And they're right, you have. You've stopped leaking your energy into everyone else's chaos. Sign 2. The mask falls away. Jung called this the death of the persona, the collapse of the mask we wear to fit in. For empaths, this mask is the nice one, the helpful one, the one who never says no. But as individuation begins, that mask becomes unbearable. You start saying what you really think, not what people want to hear. You stop pretending to agree just to avoid conflict. You stop smiling when you're exhausted. This phase terrifies people who've benefited from your self-erasure. Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But once you begin to taste self-acceptance, there's no going back. For the awakening empath, being real becomes more important than being liked. Sign 3. The projection returns. Jung's insight here is profound. He found that we often project our own qualities onto others. Empaths project their depth, their kindness, their compassion onto people who don't actually have those traits. During individuation, you begin what I call the projection recall. You stop seeing potential and start seeing reality. You stop making excuses for toxic behavior. You stop believing everyone is just misunderstood. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The awakening empath realizes that the selfishness they once despised in others was really their own repressed need for self-care. Sign 4. Boundaries become sacred. This is where transformation becomes visible. Jung said that mature individuals develop a personal relationship with their unconscious, meaning they trust their inner signals over external demands. For empaths, that means listening to your intuition when it says, enough. You start saying no without guilt. You stop justifying your boundaries. You realize that people who get angry at your boundaries were the ones benefiting from your lack of them. This isn't selfishness, it's integrity. Jung called it individual integrity, the moment when your self-respect outweighs your fear of rejection. The awakening empath learns what I call sacred selfishness, the realization that taking care of yourself isn't indulgence. It's self-preservation. Sign 5. The guilt disappears. This might be the most liberating stage of all. The heavy guilt that's haunted you for having needs, taking space, or disappointing others begins to dissolve. Jung described this as the integration of the shadow, the moment you stop rejecting parts of yourself. You realize guilt was often planted by manipulation, a way to control you through shame. When someone says, "You've changed," in that disappointed tone, you no longer rush to apologize. You simply think, yes, I have, and that's the whole point. Jung once wrote, "The individual has always been unconscious of himself and has remained so." But now, the awakening empath becomes aware of their own worth, not as a reflection of others' approval, but as a truth that stands on its own. Sign 6. Authenticity over approval. As Jung's process of individuation deepens, you begin to realize that true peace comes from living your truth, not from being liked. You start choosing authenticity over approval, even when it costs you certain relationships. For the empath, this is revolutionary. You stop performing emotions you don't actually feel. You stop pretending to agree just to avoid rejection. You stop laughing at jokes that aren't funny just to make others comfortable. This new honesty is magnetic to some and threatening to others. People sense that you've changed long before you announce it. You no longer carry that desperate need to please. Jung would call this the emergence of the authentic self, the part of you that no longer conforms to the expectations of the crowd. I call it authentic magnetism. When you stop needing everyone to like you, you start attracting people who actually see you. If people start treating you differently when you finally find your voice, it's because your energy no longer supports their illusions. Some will admire your courage. Others will fear it. But your authenticity isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. It shows others where they're still pretending. Sign 7. The healer heals themselves. wrote that many healers are actually wounded healers, people who learn to care for others as a way of avoiding their own pain. For the empath, this realization hits hard. You finally turn your healing energy inward. You begin asking, "What do I need?" instead of, "What do they need from me?" You nurture your own inner child instead of parenting everyone around you. You realize you can't pour from an empty cup, and yours has been empty for years. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For empaths, that means rediscovering yourself beyond your role as the emotional caretaker. The awakening empath learns that self-care isn't selfish, it's sacred. Sign 8. Conscious connection. This is the final sign of the empath's awakening, what Jung called conscious relationship. It's the ability to connect deeply without losing yourself. You begin practicing what I call boundaried compassion, the capacity to feel for others without absorbing their emotions. You attract people who respect your boundaries and release those who only came to take. You stop mistaking emotional chaos for intimacy. You begin to see that real love isn't about rescuing anyone, it's about meeting as equals. Jung said that true relationship requires two whole people. You can now love without losing yourself, care without carrying, give without depletion. When you reach this stage, Jung would say you've entered what he called psychological sovereignty. You're no longer driven by unconscious guilt or fear. You no longer live to be useful. You live to be real. And that authenticity transforms every relationship you have. But Jung also warned, individuation isn't a straight path. It's what he called the night sea journey, a dark, confusing passage where everything familiar dissolves. For empaths, this often feels like death, the death of the false self that was built on pleasing everyone. You might lose friends who only love the version of you that served them. You might feel lonely for the first time because you're finally alone with yourself. You might grieve relationships that were never about love, only about your usefulness. Jung said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." The empath's descent into darkness isn't punishment, it's purification. You have to face your buried emotions to reclaim your power. It's only by descending into your own underworld that you can rise into wholeness. Jung was one of the first psychologists to recognize that the mind and body are inseparable. For empaths, years of absorbing other people's emotions create what I call energetic toxicity. Chronic fatigue, anxiety, digestive problems, and even autoimmune reactions often follow. But when you stop being everyone's emotional sponge, your body begins to heal. The nervous system relaxes. Sleep deepens. Chronic pain softens. Jung understood that the psyche and the body move together. You can't heal one without healing the other. Your body was never designed to process everyone else's emotions. When you stop carrying what isn't yours, your natural vitality returns. But as your energy clears, something else shifts, your relationships. Jung observed that individuation always reorganizes social dynamics. Some relationships deepen, others dissolve. I call this the great relationship purge. It's not destruction, it's clarification. People who truly love you will adjust to your new boundaries. They'll celebrate your growth, not fear it. Those who resist your evolution were never aligned with your wholeness, only with your compliance. Jung described this process as differentiating genuine love from neurotic attachment. You begin to see that many of your past relationships were built on unspoken contracts. You give endlessly, and in return, you're conditionally accepted. When you finally break that contract by reclaiming your life, some people will walk away. Let them. Here's the paradox Jung discovered. When empaths stop absorbing everyone's pain, they don't lose their sensitivity. They refine it. They develop what I call conscious sensitivity, the ability to feel deeply without drowning in emotion. You can sense energy shifts without internalizing them. You can help others without being consumed. You can love fully without losing your center. Jung called this differentiated consciousness, the capacity to stay centered while connecting with the world. The empath who reaches this stage becomes what Jung described as a conscious individual, sensitive yet grounded, compassionate yet discerning. And Jung believed something powerful. When one person becomes conscious, it gives others permission to do the same. The empath who stops people-pleasing doesn't just heal themselves, they challenge the system. Their boundaries ripple outward, inspiring others to do the same. Your courage to say no gives others permission to protect their peace. Your refusal to absorb everyone's emotions shows others they can be responsible for their own. Your authenticity reminds them they don't need to perform to be loved. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Sign 9. The union of opposites. Jung believed that the deepest stage of transformation comes through what he called the union of opposites. For the empath, this means integrating both the light and the shadow, the nurturer and the warrior, the giver and the boundary setter. You begin to see that true compassion isn't soft or passive. It's fierce, clear, and self-respecting. You stop seeing sensitivity as weakness and start seeing it as wisdom. You can stand firm without closing your heart, and you can care deeply without losing yourself. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You stop fearing your anger, your assertiveness, your power, because you finally understand they are sacred parts of your wholeness." In this stage, empaths often begin to manifest what I call energy sovereignty. You're no longer ruled by emotional tides. Instead, you choose consciously what to give your energy to. You recognize when your empathy is being weaponized and when your compassion is being reciprocated. You become discerning, not cold, but wise. Sign 10. Purpose through presence. As your boundaries strengthen, you stop chasing purpose and start embodying it. Jung described individuation as becoming whole, not perfect. You realize your purpose isn't some distant goal. It's who you are when you live truthfully in the present moment. You stop asking, "What should I be doing?" and start asking, "How can I be fully myself in this moment?" For the empath, this shift is profound. You move from overgiving to overflow, from rescuing others to inspiring them, from surviving the world's energy to co-creating with it. And then comes what Jung called the return of the self. You realize that everything you were seeking, love, peace, meaning, was never out there. It was inside you, waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself. You were the source all along. The conscious empath's code. As this awareness deepens, a new way of being emerges. The empath no longer lives by emotional reaction, but by conscious creation. This is what I call the conscious empath's code, the principles that guide your energy, your relationships, and your purpose. Feel deeply, but choose wisely. Not every emotion is yours to carry. Give freely, but never from emptiness. Generosity without self-respect is self-erasure. Love openly, but with discernment. Not everyone deserves front-row access to your heart. Protect your peace as sacred. Silence is not withdrawal, it's wisdom. Express your truth gently but firmly. Compassion doesn't mean compliance. Trust your intuition. Your body and energy field are languages of the soul. Remember, boundaries are not walls. They are bridges for authentic connection. Let go of what no longer resonates. Not everything lost is meant to be found again. Living by this code doesn't make life easier. It makes it real. You'll still feel deeply, still sense pain in the world, but now you'll have the strength to hold it without drowning in it. Jung said that the goal of life is not happiness, but meaning. The conscious empath lives in that meaning every day. Sign 11. The sacred balance of masculine and feminine energy. At this stage, you awaken to the balance of energies within you. Jung called them the anima, feminine, and the animus, masculine. Every empath carries both, the intuitive and the decisive, the receptive and the active. For years, you may have lived mostly in your feminine energy, open, nurturing, emotional. But true wholeness requires balance. When your masculine energy awakens, you learn to protect, to direct, to act. When your feminine energy heals, you learn to receive, to flow, to trust. The empath who unites both becomes powerful and peaceful, soft yet strong, intuitive yet grounded. Jung believed this inner marriage was the ultimate goal of individuation, a psyche that is no longer divided, but whole. Sign 12, the sacred observer in the final stage. You become what Jung described as the observer of the self. You no longer identify with every emotion or story. You feel everything, but you no longer become everything you feel. You witness your emotions with compassion, not attachment. You begin to experience life not as a victim of emotion, but as a creator of meaning. This is the birth of emotional freedom. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But now you are conscious. You see your triggers as teachers, your pain as guidance, and your emotions as sacred messengers. When you reach this level of awareness, you no longer fear sensitivity, you honor it. You no longer chase connection, you embody it. You no longer lose yourself in others, you meet them from wholeness." This is what Jung meant by individuation completed. You have become your own center of gravity. The empath's gift to the world. The world doesn't need empaths who are drained, exhausted, or self-sacrificing. It needs empaths who are conscious, grounded, and self-aware. When you live as a conscious empath, your energy heals not through effort, but through presence. People around you begin to feel safe, seen, and inspired, not because you fix them, but because you embody truth. You stop being a mirror for everyone's pain and become a beacon for their potential. Your empathy evolves from emotional absorption to energetic illumination. Jung believed that each individual who becomes whole contributes to the healing of the collective unconscious. That means your personal transformation is not small, it's cosmic. This is the final transformation, when empathy becomes enlightenment. You are no longer an empath merely feeling the world. You are a conscious being shaping it. And your very existence becomes medicine for those still lost in the storm. Final reflection. So, if you are in the middle of this transformation, confused, tired, maybe even broken, remember, this is not your end. This is your initiation. Jung said that what you most need will be found where you least want to look. The pain, the loss, the loneliness, they're all signs that the false layers are falling away. The empath's awakening isn't about becoming less sensitive. It's about becoming more conscious. You are not here to escape emotion. You are here to master it. You are not here to heal everyone. You are here to become whole, and through that wholeness, the world heals with you. You are no longer the empath who suffers for others. You are the empath who awakens others. The one who feels deeply and lives wisely. The one who turns sensitivity into strength. This is your rebirth, the emergence of the conscious empath.